A simple waitress defended a vampire king from police. Next day, his power shocked her restaurant. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the story. Maria had never imagined her life would change in such a way. Working as a waitress in a small, quiet diner in downtown Manhattan, her days were usually routine, taking orders, serving food, and trying to make enough tips to cover her rent. Life wasn't perfect, but she had a steady income and a place to call home. One rainy evening, as she was closing up after the dinner rush, the door swung open, and in walked a tall, handsome man. His sharp features and dark, intense eyes immediately drew attention, but it was the strange aura surrounding him that sent a chill down her spine. He wasn't like the usual customers she served. There was something otherworldly about him. Before she could think too much about it, 2 police officers stormed in behind him, demanding to speak with the man. Maria froze for a moment, watching the scene unfold. The officers were insistent, their voices raised as they approached him, but the man remained calm, almost unnervingly so. Maria couldn't hear their exact words, but she could sense the tension building in the room. The man, whom she had assumed was just another patron, was now the center of an escalating conflict. The officers were aggressive, and they seemed determined to take him with them, but the man's composure never faltered. That's when she saw it. The flicker of something more dangerous in his eyes. A powerful presence radiated from him, and Maria felt an instinctive need to protect him, even though she had no idea who he was. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her voice shaking as she addressed the officers, telling them to back off. She had no idea what had possessed her to act like that, but something inside her told her it was the right thing to do. The officers hesitated, their expressions changing, from aggression to confusion. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as the man turned to her. His cold, calculating gaze softened for a brief moment, almost as if he was amused by her actions. "You shouldn't have done that," he said softly, his voice smooth like velvet, yet carrying an undertone of danger. The officers, still unsure of how to proceed, exchanged uncertain looks. Maria stood her ground, not fully understanding why she felt so compelled to defend this stranger. But when the man moved, it was like a switch had been flipped. His calm demeanor melted away as a powerful force emanated from him, making the officers step back in fear. The atmosphere in the diner shifted. The air grew heavier, colder, and for a moment, Maria thought she could feel the weight of centuries of history surrounding the man. Then, with a final glance at the officers, he dismissed them without a word. They left, bewildered and defeated. Maria stood there, breathless and confused, her mind racing. Who was this man? What had just happened? Why had she felt so compelled to step in? As the man turned to leave, he paused, looking back at Maria. "Thank you," he said simply, before disappearing into the night. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. The next day, her world would be turned upside down in ways she couldn't even imagine. The Vampire King's power would shock her in ways she couldn't understand. But for now, all she could do was process what had just happened. She was about to be drawn into a world far beyond her understanding, and it would change her life forever. Ira had always been a quiet, diligent worker, but that night she did something she never expected. She stood up to the police. The night after the incident at the diner, everything felt strange, almost as if the world had shifted into something unrecognizable. She had woken up to a typical rainy morning in Manhattan, the kind of day that seemed like it would drag on forever. But for Ira, today was different. Last night's events had haunted her. She couldn't shake the memory of the tall, mysterious man with those unsettling amber eyes. She had tried to forget about him, to focus on her daily grind, but it felt impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, heard his soft voice thanking her. That was the last thing she expected, a thank you from someone who seemed so powerful, so beyond ordinary. She had been just a waitress, no one special. Yet, she had acted as if her actions would somehow matter. What was it that had made her do it? Why did she step in, risking everything for a stranger? As the day went on, Ira couldn't help but noticed the strange look she received from her coworkers. Her boss, Ray, seemed to avoid making eye contact, and when the topic of last night's incident came up, people awkwardly changed the subject. The unease was palpable, but the strangest part was that, as the hours passed, Ira couldn't get the idea of the man out of her head. Her mind kept circling back to him. Who was he really? Why had the officers been so determined to take him? Was he really a criminal, or had something else been going on? The questions piled up, and Ira found herself growing more and more curious. Around noon, as she took her break outside to grab a quick coffee, something unexpected happened. As she stood by the door, she felt a sudden chill in the air, almost like the temperature had dropped a few degrees in an instant. She turned around, her heart racing as she spotted him, standing across the street, watching her. The man from last night. Her breath caught in her throat as he made eye contact with her, his gaze steady and intense. She quickly looked away, wondering if she was imagining things. But when she glanced back, he was still there. This time, he was walking toward her. Ira's heart began to beat faster, and she stepped back instinctively, unsure of what to do. Was he following her? Was he angry about last night's interference? Before she could process her thoughts, he stopped just a few feet away, his presence overwhelming, and the world seemed to freeze for a second. "Ira," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "I'm sorry for what happened yesterday. I didn't want to put you in danger." Ira could hardly believe her ears. "How do you know my name?" she stammered, feeling the weight of his words, his eyes still piercing through her. He smiled faintly. "I always know who helps me. And you have a unique way of standing. Your ground, something I don't see often." The compliment made her uncomfortable. She was just a waitress, nothing special. "Look, I don't know what happened last night, but Ira began, but he raised a hand, silencing her. "I understand you're confused. I won't explain everything now, but you'll learn soon enough." He paused for a moment before continuing. "I've seen what you can do. You're more than just a waitress. There's something about you." Ira took a step back, her mind racing. What was he talking about? Did he know something about her she didn't even know? "I'm just a regular person. I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. But the uncertainty in her tone betrayed her. The man's eyes softened, and he took a small step forward. "You don't realize it yet, but you're not as ordinary as you think. The world you know is about to change." Ira felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled again, but this time there was something darker in his expression. "Nothing yet, but you'll be drawn into something much bigger soon. I have my reasons for being here and for wanting to protect you. You have a part to play in what's coming. I can't explain it all now, but trust me when I say that you'll need to be ready." The words hung in the air, leaving Ira feeling more confused than ever. She had no idea what he was talking about, but somehow, she knew he wasn't lying. She had a feeling deep in her gut that this encounter wasn't the end of their story, it was only the beginning. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Iris stood there, her heart racing, the mystery of the man lingering in her thoughts. What had just happened? And more importantly, what would happen next? Her life had already started to change in ways she couldn't have imagined, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the true extent of that change would reveal itself. Ira couldn't shake the strange encounter from her mind. The man had disappeared into the crowd, leaving her standing there, bewildered and shaken. What had just happened? The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. The way he looked at her, the calm yet unsettling aura he exuded, it was all so out of place in her ordinary world. But what disturbed her most was what he had said. She had a part to play. Ready? What did that even mean? She had no answers, but the feeling of being drawn into something far bigger than herself was undeniable. Days passed, and Ira did her best to go back to her routine. She worked long hours at the diner, serving tables, refilling coffee cups, and pretending everything was normal. But deep down, she knew nothing was normal anymore. Her encounters with the man were becoming harder to ignore. She started noticing little things, the way people avoided looking at her, the whispers behind her back. It was as if the world around her had changed overnight. No one spoke directly to her about what happened, but she could feel the eyes on her. Was it because of the man? Or was there something more to it? Then, one evening, just as she was closing up the diner for the night, she heard a familiar voice. "Ira." Her heart stopped. It was him, the man, standing in the doorway, just as he had that fateful night. His presence filled the room, making everything feel cold, distant. Ira's breath hitched in her throat. "You're following me now?" she asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. The man smiled faintly, his eyes still as intense as ever. "Not following. Watching. You don't know it yet, but you're about to be a part of something much bigger." Ira swallowed, trying to steady her shaking hands. "What do you mean? What do you want from me? I told you before. You have a part to play. I'm here to make sure you're ready," he said, his voice soft, but the underlying power in his tone sent a chill down her spine. Ira shook her head, feeling overwhelmed. "I don't understand. I'm just a waitress. Why would I have a part in anything that involves you?" "You're not just a waitress, Ira," he replied, taking a step closer. "You're more than you realize. And your actions have already shown me that. You protected me. Not many people would do that." "I wasn't protecting you," she protested, her voice shaky. "I was just doing what felt right." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her, his piercing eyes narrowing. "Exactly," he said quietly. "You acted on instinct, and that's what makes you different. You're not like the others." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Ira took a step back, her mind racing. "But what does that mean for me? What does this have to do with me?" He took another step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "It means you'll have to make a choice soon. A choice that will shape everything." "A choice about what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled then, but it wasn't a comforting smile. "A choice about where your loyalty lies. There's a storm coming, and you're in the eye of it." Ira's heart raced, and she felt a cold sweat form on the back of her neck. She didn't know what he was talking about, but somehow, she knew he wasn't lying. Everything inside her screamed that this man was tied to something much darker and more dangerous than she could imagine. "Why me?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why am I the one you're choosing?" "Because you've already made your choice," he said. "The moment you stood up to the police, the moment you stepped in to protect me, you made your choice. And now, you have no way out." Ira's legs felt like jelly, and she had to steady herself against the counter. "You're saying I can't walk away from this?" "No," he said simply. "But you wouldn't want to walk away even if you could." "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, the confusion thick in her voice. The man took another step forward, his presence overpowering. "You will. Soon enough. And when you do, you'll realize how much you've already changed." The weight of his words settled heavily on her chest. He was right. Something inside her had already shifted, something she couldn't explain. She had already made her choice, whether she understood it or not. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now," he said, his voice low and filled with dark promise. "Now the real test begins." With that, he turned and walked out of the diner, leaving Ira standing there, more uncertain than ever about the path her life was about to take. She felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation swirling inside her. She had no idea what was coming, but she could feel that everything was about to change. Ira had never felt more lost in her life. The encounter with the man, the vampire king, as he had called himself, was still fresh in her mind. What did it all mean? How could she, a simple waitress, have gotten involved in something so much bigger than herself? She kept replaying his words over and over in her head, but the more she thought about them, the more confused she became. The real test begins. What test? And why was he so sure that she would be ready for whatever was coming? A few days had passed since that fateful night, and Ira was still trying to process everything. Life at the diner had returned to its usual routine, but it felt different now. Her coworkers treated her with distant politeness, their eyes avoiding hers whenever they thought she wasn't looking. The whispers, the uneasy glances, they were all becoming impossible to ignore. It was as though something about her had changed overnight, like she was no longer just Ira, the waitress, but something else. She spent her shifts lost in thought, staring at the clock, counting down the minutes until she could leave. It wasn't just the way her colleagues looked at her, it was the constant feeling of being watched. One evening, after the dinner rush had slowed, Ira stood behind the counter, her hands wiping down the same spot for what seemed like the 100th time. It was then that she felt it again, the chill in the air, that unsettling presence. She turned around, heart pounding in her chest, to see him standing in the doorway. The vampire king. He didn't speak immediately, just stood there, his gaze fixed on her. His dark, intense eyes seemed to pierce right through her, and for a moment, Ira couldn't move, couldn't speak. The world outside the diner seemed to fade, and all that mattered was the man in front of her. "Ira," he said at last, his voice like a low, soothing murmur. "I need to speak with you." Ira swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "What is it you want from me?" He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "It's not about what I want. It's about what you need to understand. You've been chosen, Ira. Chosen for something greater than you can imagine." Ira's breath caught in her throat. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. "Chosen? For what? I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything about whatever it is you're talking about." The man smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "That's where you're wrong. You know more than you realize. You've always known. It's in your blood." Ira took a step back, her heart racing. "Blood? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about who you are. The choices you've made, the way you act, it's all connected. You defended me, didn't you? Without even thinking, you stood up to the police. You acted on instinct, and that's not something everyone can do." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You didn't just protect me. You protected something far more important." Ira felt her legs weaken beneath her. Her mind was spinning, but she couldn't ignore the truth that seemed to be emerging from the shadows of his words. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "What am I supposed to do? What is all of this?" He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're meant to be more than just a waitress. You're part of a much larger story. And that story is beginning now." Ira's pulse quickened. "And what do you expect me to do?" The Vampire King's gaze softened, just for a moment, before his face hardened again. "I don't expect you to do anything, Ira. You've already made your choice. All I'm doing is helping you see what's in front of you." Ira felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "What's in front of me?" The man didn't answer immediately. He turned his head, as if listening to something Ira couldn't hear. "There are forces at work now that you can't understand. But you will. Soon. This world, the one you've lived in all your life, is changing, and you're right in the middle of it." His words were cryptic, but Ira could feel the weight of them pressing down on her chest. She had no choice but to follow him into whatever this was. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to come together, but the bigger picture was still out of reach. Ira couldn't decide if she was terrified or curious, or both. "I don't know what you want from me," she said again, her voice barely audible. "I just want to live my life." The Vampire King stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "You can't live the life you knew anymore, Ira. It's already slipping away from you. What you need to do now is decide how you want to move forward." His gaze was intense, almost too intense. "You can choose to walk away, or you can choose to embrace what's coming. But whatever choice you make, remember this, you won't be alone. I'll be with you every step of the way." Ira didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to respond. But deep down, she knew he was right. Her life had already changed, and it was no longer in her hands to decide where it would go next. The choice had already been made, and she was about to find out exactly what that meant. Ira had never felt so disoriented. The days following her encounter with the man, the Vampire King, felt like a dream, a nightmare, all rolled into one. She had tried to move on, to pretend that nothing had changed, but every moment felt like she was living in someone else's life. The weight of his words, the choice she was supposed to make, hung over her like a dark cloud. She had always prided herself on being a simple, ordinary person, but now everything about her world felt extraordinary. She couldn't go back to the way things were. Not now. Not after what he had said. It was the middle of the afternoon when she finally saw him again. The diner was quieter than usual. The lunch rush had passed, and the few customers left were lost in their own worlds. Ira was behind the counter, wiping down the same spot she had been obsessively cleaning all day when she felt that unmistakable chill fill the air. She looked up, and there he was, standing just inside the door. The Vampire King. His presence was overpowering, as if the very air around him had thickened. Ira's heart skipped a beat. She had barely seen him since the night of the police confrontation, and yet, in some strange way, she knew it was only a matter of time before he came back into her life. "Ira," he said, his voice like velvet. She nodded, too stunned to speak. "You've been thinking about our conversation," he continued, his gaze intense, like he could read her every thought. Ira opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She had no idea what to say. I'm here to explain, he said softly, almost apologetically. To help you understand what you're becoming part of. Ira's mind raced. Becoming part of? What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a waitress. I don't have anything to do with your world. The Vampire King took a step forward, closing the distance between them. His gaze never left hers. You're wrong, Ira. You've been a part of this world for much longer than you think. Ira felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What do you mean? She asked, her voice shaking despite herself. He paused, considering her question before speaking again. I told you before. You were chosen. Chosen to be a part of something much bigger. Something that's been in motion for centuries. Ira's breath caught in her throat. But why me? I don't even understand what's happening. What does this all have to do with me? Everything, he said simply. Your actions have shown me that you're different. You stood up to the police, didn't you? You defended me. That's not something most people would do. And because of that, you've crossed into my world. But I didn't do it for you. Ira protested, taking a step back. I did it because it felt right. I don't even know who you are. Why should I trust you? The Vampire King's eyes softened for a brief moment, but his expression quickly returned to its usual intensity. I understand your hesitation, Ira. I'm not asking you to trust me. Not yet. I'm asking you to trust what's inside you. There's something about you. Something that's been dormant, but it's waking up. Ira felt like she was drowning in his words. I don't know what you mean by that, she said, her voice trembling. I'm just a regular person. I don't have any special powers. I'm not like you. He shook his head slowly, almost as if pitying her. You don't understand, but you will. Soon. The power you have inside you is something that can't be ignored. It's not just about strength. It's about the choices you make, the way you see the world. Ira could feel her head spinning. She was trapped in this conversation, unable to break free. She had never felt more out of place in her entire life. I'm not like you, she repeated, more to herself than to him. I'm just trying to survive, just trying to get by. You're already more than that, the Vampire King said, his voice unwavering. And you're going to have to decide soon. The world you know is about to change, and you will have a choice to make. Will you fight for what's right, or will you choose to walk away? Ira felt her chest tighten. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. I never asked for any of this. I never wanted any of this. I just want my life back. The Vampire King took another step toward her, his presence overwhelming. You can't have it back, Ira. That life is gone. The world is changing, and you're part of that change. The question is, what will you do with the power you've been given? Ira didn't know how to answer. She felt small, insignificant in the face of his power. I can't do this, she whispered, the words barely audible. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Yes, you can. You already are. Ira's mind was reeling, and for the first time, she felt truly afraid. Afraid of what was coming, afraid of the unknown future, and most of all, afraid of what she was becoming. She had always thought she was just a simple waitress, but now, everything was different, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face what was coming. Ira woke up that morning feeling like something had shifted inside her. The man, this Vampire King, had dropped a bombshell on her life the day before, and despite the chaos in her mind, the events kept playing over and over. She had been trying to find a way to return to her normal routine, to ignore the terrifying words he had spoken to her, but the truth was undeniable. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. Everything about her life had changed, whether she was ready for it or not. Her body felt heavy as she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the gray, rain-filled skies outside her window. It had been nearly a full day since her conversation with the Vampire King. He had told her that the world she knew was no longer the same, that she was part of something far larger than she could ever imagine. But despite his assurances, Ira still had no idea what to expect. He had promised that she wouldn't be alone, that he would be there to guide her, but every part of her wanted to pull away, to run back to the life she once had. That life, however, felt so far out of reach now. She stood up, taking a deep breath, determined to face the day. The diner awaited her. But as soon as she stepped into the small, familiar space, she could feel it. The atmosphere was different. The air was thick with something unspoken. The usual hum of activity had slowed, and the staff seemed more distant, as though they were all waiting for something to happen. She caught sight of Ray, her manager, who was standing by the counter, talking with a couple of the other waitstaff. As she approached, they fell silent, their eyes darting away from her. Ray gave her a weak smile, but there was something off in his expression. "Morning, Ira," he said, his voice strained. "Morning," she replied, her voice steady but her mind racing. She had no idea what had happened overnight, but she could feel it. The tension. It was in the way everyone looked at her. No one said anything directly, but the way they all seemed to tiptoe around her, avoiding eye contact, it was like they knew something she didn't. She couldn't help but feel the weight of their silence. She decided to shake it off. She had enough on her plate already. Just as she was about to walk to her station, the door to the diner swung open, and in walked the man again. The Vampire King. Ira's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not today. Not in her world. He moved through the diner with an ease that was both captivating and terrifying. The air around him felt colder, like the temperature had dropped by several degrees. He didn't look at anyone else. His gaze immediately found Ira. She felt the familiar chill run down her spine, but this time it was different. This time, she wasn't frozen by fear. She was curious. He walked straight toward her, and the entire diner seemed to hold its breath. She took a step back instinctively, her heart pounding. "Ira," he said softly, his voice smooth like velvet. "We need to talk." "Not here," she said quickly, glancing nervously at the other customers and staff. It was clear to her now, everyone was watching them. The king nodded slightly and gestured for her to follow him. "We can talk outside," he said. Ira hesitated, her mind racing, but something inside her told her to trust him, or at least to hear him out. She nodded and followed him as he led her to the back alley behind the diner. The moment they stepped outside, the cool air hit her, but it did nothing to ease the unease she felt. He turned to face her, his eyes piercing her very soul. "You felt it, haven't you?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. "The way everything's changing." Ira nodded, unsure of how to respond. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but even as she spoke the words, she knew they weren't true. She felt it, deep down. "You're starting to realize that your life has already changed," he continued. "And you're going to have to make a decision soon. A decision that will affect everything." Ira swallowed, her throat dry. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't understand any of this." The Vampire King looked at her for a moment, his gaze softening. "No one ever is," he said quietly. "But that's why I'm here. To guide you." Ira wanted to ask more questions, but they stuck in her throat. She felt like she was being dragged into something she couldn't control. "What do I have to do?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll know when the time comes," he said. "But for now, you need to stay alert. There are forces at play you don't yet understand, and you're at the center of it all." Ira felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. "I don't want to be part of this," she said, her voice shaking. "I just want to live my life." "You can't," he said gently. "Not anymore. But you're not alone in this. I'll be with you every step of the way. You don't have to fight it. You just have to trust what's inside you." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what was to come. Ira didn't know what to say, but she knew one thing. Her life, as she had known it, was over. What came next was beyond her control. And somehow, she felt like she had already made her choice, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. Ira walked back into the diner, her mind racing. The Vampire King's words still echoed in her ears, making it impossible to focus on anything else. The air around her felt thick, like she was standing in the eye of a storm she didn't understand. She had tried to keep her distance, to convince herself she was imagining things, but the truth was undeniable now. She was caught in something bigger than herself, and there was no turning back. As she walked past the counter, she saw the familiar faces of the regulars, sitting quietly and enjoying their meals. But something felt off. The usual buzz of conversation was muted, and everyone seemed to be watching her. She felt eyes on her, piercing through the walls, and a shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't just paranoia. There was something in the air. As she reached the back of the diner, she saw Ray, her manager, standing by the door to the kitchen. He was looking at her with a mixture of unease and something else she couldn't quite place. Ira forced a smile, trying to act normal. "Everything okay, Ray?" she asked, her voice light, though she felt anything but. "Yeah, just." Ray hesitated, then quickly turned away, avoiding her gaze. "Nothing. Just the usual." Ira didn't buy it. She had known Ray for long enough to know when something was wrong. He had always been straightforward with her, but now, he seemed guarded, distant. Before she could ask again, the door to the diner swung open. Ira's heart skipped a beat. It was him again. The Vampire King. She could feel his presence before she even saw him. The room seemed to grow colder, and the tension in the diner became palpable. His eyes scanned the room, his gaze falling on Ira almost immediately. Without a word, he began walking toward her, the crowd parting as he moved, like they instinctively knew to stay out of his way. Ira's breath caught in her throat, and her palms began to sweat. She hadn't been prepared for this. He wasn't supposed to come here, not now, not like this. She turned to Ray, but he was already walking away, his shoulders tense as if he were trying to avoid the confrontation. The Vampire King stopped in front of Ira, his presence overwhelming. He looked down at her, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something soft, something human. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same cold, calculating gaze. "Ira," he said, his voice low and commanding. "We need to talk." Ira took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "We've talked enough," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand any of this. I don't know why you're here or what you want from me." He didn't move, his gaze never leaving hers. "You know more than you think," he said, "and you will understand soon enough." Ira shook her head. "I don't want any part of whatever this is. I just want to go back to my normal life." He didn't respond at first. Instead, he just stood there, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see right through her. Finally, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "You can't go back, Ira. That life is over. There are things happening now, things you don't understand, and you're caught in the middle of it all. You can either fight it or accept it." Ira felt a wave of panic rising in her chest. "What do you mean? What's happening? What do I have to do?" "You don't have to do anything," he said, his voice calm. "But there's a choice you'll have to make soon. And when that time comes, I'll be here to help you. But you need to trust me. Trust that I'm telling you the truth." Ira's mind was racing. She wanted to reject everything he was saying, but deep down, she knew that he wasn't lying. The world around her had already changed, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "What if I don't trust you?" she asked, her voice shaky. "What if I choose to walk away?" The Vampire King stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Then you'll be walking away from everything. From your future, from everything you could become, and you'll be alone." Ira looked up at him, trying to find some trace of humanity in his eyes, but all she saw was power, raw, ancient power. "I don't want to be alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The Vampire King seemed to read the fear in her eyes. "You won't be, but you'll have to make a choice. You'll have to decide where your loyalty lies." He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I'm not asking you to join me, Ira. I'm asking you to join your true self, to embrace the power inside you." Ira felt a shiver run down her spine. She had no idea what he was talking about, but the look in his eyes told her that whatever was coming, she wouldn't be able to stop it. She didn't know what her future held, but one thing was clear. She couldn't go back to the life she had before. The choices she made now would determine everything. "What happens next?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You'll find out soon enough," he replied, his eyes softening for the first time. "But remember this, Ira, you're not alone in this. Not anymore." With those words, the Vampire King turned and walked out of the diner, leaving Ira standing there, her heart racing, her mind spinning with the uncertainty of what was to come. She had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. Ira sat in the diner, her mind reeling from everything that had happened in the past few days. The Vampire King's words echoed in her head, relentless and unsettling. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." She had no idea what that meant, but she knew it wasn't just some comforting phrase. The choice she had to make was coming, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She couldn't go back to her old life. Not anymore. The door to the diner opened, and the familiar jingle of the bell above the door snapped Ira out of her thoughts. She glanced up, expecting the usual stream of customers, but her breath caught when she saw who it was. It was him, the Vampire King. He entered the diner as if he owned it, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The atmosphere shifted as he walked toward her, the room suddenly feeling colder, quieter. The few customers who remained quickly averted their gaze, their unease palpable. Ira stood up, her hands trembling as she wiped them on her apron, trying to steady herself. She couldn't look away from him, even if she wanted to. He was the center of everything now, the one who had changed the course of her life with a few simple words. "Ira," he said, his voice soft, almost too soft. "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. She had been hoping for some time to pass before seeing him again. But here he was, as if fate had decided for her. "What do you want from me now?" she asked, trying to sound calm but failing. He smiled, a small, knowing smile that only deepened her confusion. "I don't want anything from you, Ira," he replied. "I'm here to help you." Ira took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. "Help me? How? You've already turned my life upside down. I don't even know what's going on anymore." He didn't seem bothered by her words. "I understand," he said, his eyes intense. "That's why I'm here. To explain what's happening, and to prepare you for what's coming." Ira's stomach tightened. "I don't know if I'm ready for any of this," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to be ready," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "But you will be. You already are." Ira didn't understand. She had no idea what he was talking about. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I'm just a waitress. I'm not like you. I don't have any special powers." The Vampire King's eyes softened for a moment. "You're right," he said. "You're not like me. But you're more than you think. And you have abilities inside you that you haven't even begun to tap into." Ira shook her head. "I don't understand. I'm just a regular person. I don't have anything to do with your world, your powers." He stepped closer, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink around them. "That's exactly what you don't understand," he said quietly. "You're already part of this world, whether you want to be or not. You've been drawn into something bigger than yourself." Ira felt her pulse quicken. "What are you talking about? I just want my normal life back. I don't want to be a part of whatever this is." The Vampire King studied her for a moment, his gaze piercing. "You can't have it back, Ira. That life is gone. You've already made a choice. And now, you have to decide how you'll move forward." Ira opened her mouth to protest, but he held up a hand to stop her. "It's not about what you want, Ira. It's about what's coming. And what you do next will decide everything." Ira could feel her legs weaken, her body trembling with uncertainty. "What's coming?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The Vampire King stepped back slightly, looking at her with a mixture of pity and understanding. "There's a war brewing, Ira. And you're right in the middle of it. The forces you've been unknowingly drawn into are more dangerous than anything you could imagine. And the time is coming when you'll have to choose a side." Ira felt a cold chill spread through her. "A war? What are you talking about?" The Vampire King nodded, his expression grim. "The conflict between our kind, the vampires, and the humans is about to reach a breaking point. And you, Ira, you're part of this. You've been chosen to help tip the scales." Ira's mind was spinning. "But I don't know anything about this," she whispered. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do." "You will learn," he said, his voice calm but unwavering. "But you have to make a decision. You'll either fight for us, or you'll stand with the humans. And whatever choice you make, you won't be alone. I'll be there to help you." Ira felt a wave of fear wash over her. "I don't want to be a part of this," she said, her voice breaking. "I just want to be normal." The Vampire King reached out and touched her arm gently. "You are normal, Ira," he said softly. "But you are also so much more. And the time is coming when you'll have to choose who you want to be. But know this, you're not alone. Not anymore." Ira looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty, fear, and something else, curiosity. Her life had already changed in ways she couldn't understand, and now, she was being asked to make a choice that could change everything. She didn't know if she was ready, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. Iris stood there, her mind spinning with everything the Vampire King had just revealed. A war? A war between vampires and humans? And she was supposed to pick a side? The weight of his words crushed down on her, suffocating her with fear and uncertainty. She wasn't equipped for any of this. She was just a waitress from a small diner, trying to make ends meet, trying to get by. How had she become a part of something so much bigger than herself? She took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "I can't be a part of this. I don't even know who I am anymore. I was just a normal person, just trying to live my life." The Vampire King studied her with his intense gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and something else, something darker, more urgent. You can't go back to that life, Ira. It's gone. But that doesn't mean you're alone in this. You'll never be alone. Ira felt her breath catch in her throat. I don't understand. How can you expect me to just pick a side? I'm not a fighter. I don't have any special powers. I don't even know what's happening, let alone how to fix it. The Vampire King's gaze softened, and for a moment, he almost seemed human. I don't expect you to fight alone, he said, his voice gentle but firm. You'll be trained. You'll learn what you need to know. But you have to trust me, Ira. The power inside you is real. You've already started to awaken it, whether you like it or not. Ira felt a cold shiver run down her spine. I didn't ask for any of this, she said, her voice trembling. I never wanted any of this. I know, he replied quietly. But the choice is yours now. You've already made the first decision. You stood up for me. You protected me when no one else would. That was the first step. Ira looked away, unable to meet his gaze. She felt a lump form in her throat, her hands shaking at her sides. I don't want this responsibility. I didn't ask for any of it. The Vampire King stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. None of us ever choose this path. But sometimes, the path chooses us. And now, you're on it, whether you want to be or not. There's no turning back. His words hit her like a punch to the stomach. She had already chosen, hadn't she? Her instincts had led her to stand up to the police, to defend someone she didn't even know. She had crossed a line. And now, there was no going back. What happens now? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King's gaze hardened, and his voice grew colder. Now, the real war begins. You'll be trained, Ira. You'll learn everything you need to know. And you'll make your choice, whether to fight for us, or to fight against us. The choice is yours, but the consequences will be far-reaching. Ira felt a lump form in her throat, but she nodded, unable to speak. She didn't know what to do, but she had no choice but to follow this path. We don't have much time, the Vampire King said, his voice low and urgent. The forces against us are gathering, and they won't wait. We need to be ready. You need to be ready. He turned to leave, but then he paused and glanced back at her. There's one thing you should know, he said, his voice softening slightly. You're stronger than you think. You've always been stronger than you know. And when the time comes, you'll rise to the occasion. Ira watched him walk away, his words echoing in her mind. Stronger than she thought? She didn't feel strong. She felt scared, confused, lost. But she also felt something else, something deep inside her, a flicker of power that she couldn't quite explain. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew it was real. The Vampire King had told her the choice was hers, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. The path had already been set, and now, she was going to have to face whatever came next, whether she was ready or not. With a deep breath, she turned back to the diner. The customers were still there, eating their meals, oblivious to the storm that was brewing around them. Ira walked back to the counter, her hands steadying as she tried to regain control of her emotions. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She couldn't stay in this safe little world forever. The Vampire King was right. The war was coming, and Ira was about to be thrust into the center of it. Ira had spent the last few days trying to keep herself together, but nothing felt normal anymore. The Vampire King's words haunted her every moment. He had told her she wasn't alone in this, that she had power inside her. But she didn't feel powerful. She felt scared, confused, and more alone than ever. As she stood in the diner, waiting for the next rush of customers, her thoughts were consumed with what he had said. She had crossed a line the night she stepped in to protect him. And now, there was no turning back. Her life was no longer her own. The clock ticked slowly, and Ira found herself looking up every few minutes, as if waiting for the Vampire King to return. He had said the war was coming, that she had a choice to make. But no matter what, the consequences would be huge. Ira couldn't stop thinking about it. What side would she choose? And how would she even know which side was right? She hadn't asked for any of this, yet she was caught in the middle of something far bigger than herself. The bell above the door jingled, and Ira snapped out of her thoughts. She turned to see the familiar face of her friend, Jenna, walking in, her face lighting up when she spotted Ira behind the counter. "Hey girl," Jenna called as she walked over to her, a bright smile on her face. But Ira could see the concern in Jenna's eyes as she sat down across from her. "You okay? You've been looking kind of out of it lately." Ira hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She couldn't exactly tell Jenna about the Vampire King or the dangerous world she was suddenly a part of. Yeah, I'm fine, she lied, forcing a smile. Just a lot on my mind, you know? Work, life, stuff like that. Jenna raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. Uh-huh. Well, if you need to talk, I'm here. Ira nodded, grateful for her friend's support, but feeling a sharp pang of guilt. How could she tell Jenna the truth? How could she explain that her life was no longer her own? That she was about to be drawn into a war between vampires and humans? Thanks, Ira said softly. I appreciate it. I'll let you know if I need anything. Jenna seemed to relax a little, but Ira could still see the concern in her eyes. You sure? You know, you can always vent to me if it helps. Ira forced herself to nod again, the weight of the truth heavy on her shoulders. I know, Jen. I will. As Jenna sat back in her seat, Ira's mind raced. She had always trusted Jenna, but how could she drag her into this mess? She had already been pulled into something she couldn't fully understand, and now, Jenna's concern was just another reminder of the life she was about to leave behind. She was no longer the same person she had been a few days ago, and the decision she had to make was coming faster than she was ready for. As the rest of the afternoon passed, Ira found herself increasingly restless. She couldn't sit still, couldn't focus on anything for too long. The weight of the Vampire King's words pressed down on her, each moment pushing her closer to the inevitable choice she would have to make. And then, just as the diner was starting to empty out, the door swung open once more. She looked up, and there he was, the Vampire King. He didn't look like he was here to chat this time. His expression was serious, his usual calm demeanor replaced by an edge that sent a chill through Ira's bones. Ira, he said, his voice low and urgent. It's time. Her heart skipped a beat. Time for what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Time for you to make a choice, he said, stepping closer to her. The war is coming, and we need you to be ready. You've been trained for this, even if you don't know it yet. But the choice is yours. Ira's mind was spinning. I don't know what you want from me. I don't know how to fight a war. You're not just anything, he interrupted, his voice sharp. You are more than you think. You've already proven yourself. You stepped in when others would have backed away. And now, you need to decide where you stand. Ira felt her throat tighten. But I don't know what's right, she whispered. How do I know which side to choose? The Vampire King's eyes softened for a moment, and he reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. That's the hardest part. But you won't be alone, Ira. You never were. I'll be here, and you'll learn. You just have to trust yourself. She looked up at him, her chest tight with uncertainty. I don't know if I can do this. You already are, he said, his voice steady. You've already made your first decision. Now, you just need to trust in that decision. Ira stood there, her heart racing as she tried to process everything. She had always thought she was just a simple person, someone who lived a quiet life. But now, her world was anything but quiet, and the choices she made would have consequences far beyond anything she could imagine. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She was about to face the unknown, and she could no longer run from it. Ira stood in front of the Vampire King, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had never been more uncertain in her life. The words he had spoken earlier echoed in her head, a constant reminder that her world was no longer her own. The choice she had to make seemed impossible, and yet, it was hers to make. She had already crossed a line when she defended him against the police, when she stood up against forces far greater than herself. Now, she had to decide where she stood. The Vampire King's presence was overwhelming. She had no choice but to follow him, to trust him, but the fear of what that might mean gnawed at her. She wasn't ready to face whatever was coming. She didn't know if she would ever be ready. I can't do this, she whispered, looking up at him, her voice shaking. I don't know how to fight. I don't know how to choose. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. You've already chosen, Ira. You've proven it. The moment you stood against the police, you chose to protect someone, to step into a world you never asked for. Now, you have to decide how far you're willing to go. His words hit her like a wave. Ira had always thought of herself as someone who just wanted to live a quiet, simple life, away from conflict, away from danger. But now, she was standing on the edge of a decision that could change everything. But what if I'm not strong enough? She asked, her voice barely audible. What if I can't do what you need me to do? You are stronger than you think, he said firmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Strength isn't about power or fighting. It's about the choices you make, about standing by those you care about, even when it's hard. You've already shown that you have what it takes. Ira took a step back, looking away from him. She didn't know if she believed him. She didn't feel strong. She felt terrified. Terrified of the war that was coming, terrified of what she was being asked to become. I don't even know what I'm fighting for, she said, her voice filled with frustration. I don't understand any of this. Why me? Why did it have to be me? The Vampire King studied her for a moment, his gaze softening. Because you have a unique place in this world. You're more than just a waitress. You've always been more. The blood that runs through your veins carries something that can change the course of everything. Ira shook her head, unable to comprehend his words. No, I'm just a regular person. I don't have any powers. I'm not like you. He nodded slowly, as if understanding her disbelief. You may not have the same power I do, but you have something else, something even more important. You have the will to stand up, to do what's right, even when it's difficult. That's why you're here. That's why you were chosen. Ira closed her eyes, trying to block out the overwhelming thoughts. She felt like she was suffocating, drowning in the weight of the decision she had to make. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had already made the choice. She had stepped into this world the moment she decided to defend him. I can't keep living like this, she said quietly. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. It's not. No, it's not, he agreed. But that's why you're here. You're going to help change it. You're going to fight for something greater than yourself. Ira felt a lump form in her throat. I don't know if I'm ready for that. You are, the Vampire King said, his voice filled with conviction. And you'll see that when the time comes. But for now, you have to trust. In yourself. Trust that you're capable of more than you know. Ira stood there, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but there was no turning back now. She had already made the first choice. Now, the only thing left was to face what was coming. The war was inevitable, and Ira was right in the middle of it. The choice she made now would determine everything. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. What do I do now? She asked, her voice steady but filled with fear. The Vampire King looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Now we prepare. You'll be trained. You'll learn everything you need to know. And when the time comes, you'll be ready. I don't know if I ever will be, she whispered, more to herself than to him. But the Vampire King said nothing. Instead, he turned and walked toward the door. You will, he said softly, not looking back. Trust in that. Iris stood in the quiet of the diner, her thoughts swirling. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain, there was no going back. The war was coming, and she would have to face it. She didn't know if she was ready, but there was no choice. She had already chosen. Now, she would have to see it through. Ira's world had never felt so out of control. The days following her encounter with the Vampire King had blurred into one long, anxious stretch of time. She felt as though the ground was constantly shifting beneath her, and she was struggling to keep her footing. The weight of his words pressed on her mind every waking moment, even when she tried to ignore them. She had made her choice, but now, she had to live with the consequences. Every part of her was screaming to run, to go back to the life she had before, when things were simple, when she could just go to work, come home, and sleep without a care in the world. But the truth was undeniable. There was no going back now. The war was coming, and she was part of it. The Vampire King had given her no time to think, no time to question the path ahead. He had told her she was ready, that she had powers she didn't even understand. But how could she trust him? How could she trust any of this? She wasn't like him. She wasn't some ancient, powerful being. She was just a waitress. Nothing more. The Vampire King had left the diner after their conversation, but his presence lingered like a shadow. Ira couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the world was closing in around her. Every time she stepped outside, she felt eyes on her, tracking her every move. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. She knew something was out there, something waiting for her to make a mistake. The fear gnawed at her, but she couldn't show it. Not yet. She had to keep up appearances. She had to be strong. The following day, Ira's shift at the diner felt like a blur. She moved through the motions mechanically, serving food, refilling drinks, and pretending everything was normal. But her mind wasn't in the diner. It was racing, wondering if the Vampire King would show up again. Wondering what he wanted from her, and what kind of danger she was about to be thrust into. As the dinner rush ended, and the last few customers filed out of the diner, Ira let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. But just as she was about to head into the kitchen to take a break, she saw him. The Vampire King. This time, he was not standing in the doorway. He was right in front of her. Ira froze, her heart pounding in her chest. He looked different this time, more focused, more serious. The usual calm expression was replaced by one of quiet determination. Without a word, he motioned for her to follow him. Ira hesitated, the weight of everything pressing down on her. What could he possibly want now? But she had no choice. He was right. She couldn't run from this. Not anymore. She followed him out of the diner and into the darkened street, her feet moving almost on their own. The chill of the evening air seemed to wrap around her like a blanket, and she shivered despite herself. They walked in silence for a few blocks, the sound of their footsteps the only noise in the quiet night. Ira's mind was racing with questions, but she couldn't bring herself to ask them. She didn't even know where they were going. Finally, the Vampire King stopped. In front of a nondescript building, the door slightly ajar. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "This is where you'll begin your training," he said, his voice steady. Ira blinked, confusion settling in. Training? For what? He looked at her with a knowing glint in his eyes. For the war? For what's coming? The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had hoped it was all some kind of mistake, a misunderstanding. But now, standing in front of this building, she knew it was all real. The Vampire King was right. There was no running from it. She was part of something much bigger than herself. And whether she was ready or not, she had a role to play. The Vampire King stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "You may not understand all of this right now, but you will. The training will teach you what you need to know." Ira took a shaky breath. "I'm not sure I can do this." He tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words. "You don't have a choice, Ira. You've already made your first decision. Now you need to learn how to use what's inside you. And you need to prepare for what's to come." Ira swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. "What if I don't want to be a part of this?" she asked, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. The Vampire King looked at her with an almost sad expression. "You already are," he said quietly. "There's no going back now." Ira's heart sank. She had known that, deep down. But hearing it from him made it all too real. "What if I fail?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then you'll learn from it," he replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "But you won't fail. You'll be ready." With those words, he turned and walked into the building, and Ira followed him, her mind filled with uncertainty. The doors closed behind her with a soft click, and she was plunged into the unknown. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding. She was in the heart of a world she had never asked for, and now, she had to find a way to survive it. No more running. No more pretending. The war was coming, and Ira was going to have to fight, whether she was ready or not. Ira stood in the dimly lit room, her heart pounding in her chest. The walls were lined with ancient books and scrolls, the air thick with the scent of history and power. She had been here for what felt like hours, but time seemed irrelevant in this place. The Vampire King had left her in this chamber for her training, but so far, she hadn't learned anything useful. Instead, she found herself overwhelmed by the weight of the situation. The war he had warned her about, the choice she had made, it was all real now. There was no denying it. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was part of something much bigger, and every decision she made from here on out would shape her future, her survival. She had tried to fight it, to deny the truth, but it had been impossible. The moment she had stepped into this world, her life had been written in a new script, one she didn't fully understand. Her training had begun with simple exercises, reading the old texts, learning the history of the vampires and the humans they had once lived alongside. The more she learned, the more she realized how little she truly knew about the world around her. The Vampire King had been patient with her, but he didn't waste time on pleasantries. He showed her the basics, how to move faster, how to sense danger before it arrived, how to use the abilities she had no idea she possessed. But there was always something missing. Every time he looked at her, it was as if he was waiting for something, as if he believed she had something more inside her. But Ira didn't feel anything special. She was just scared. She wanted to scream, to tell him that she didn't want any of this. But that was the point. She didn't have a choice. A soft knock on the door broke her out of her thoughts. The Vampire King entered, his presence filling the room as always. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an underlying edge. Ira looked up at him, her chest tight. "Ready for what?" she asked, though deep down, she already knew the answer. "For the final test," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "For the war that's coming. It's time to decide which side you'll stand on." The words hit her like a wave. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she felt paralyzed. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "I don't even know if I want to be a part of this." The Vampire King studied her for a long moment before speaking again, his voice softening. "You've already been part of this from the moment you decided to defend me. You made your choice the moment you stepped into this world. Now, you need to embrace it. You need to trust in your strength, in what you're capable of." Ira's mind raced. She didn't feel strong. She felt like she was breaking under the pressure, like the weight of everything was crushing her. "But what if I'm not strong enough?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What if I fail?" The Vampire King stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Everyone has doubts," he said, his voice low. "Even I do. But you can't let fear control you. Fear is the enemy. You have the power inside you, Ira. You just have to let it out." Ira looked up at him, her breath caught in her throat. She didn't understand. How could she have power? She was just a normal person, a waitress who had stumbled into a world she never asked for. But the more she looked into his eyes, the more she realized that he wasn't lying. She had changed. She had felt it the moment she stepped into this world. Something inside her had awoken, something that she couldn't explain. She didn't know what it was, but she could feel it pulsing beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. The Vampire King stepped back, giving her space. "You'll face the test now. The war is coming, and there's no more time to prepare. You'll either stand with us, or you'll stand against us. But the time to decide is now." Ira took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She knew he was right. There was no more running, no more hiding. The moment she had taken a stand, everything had changed. And now, she had to face the consequences of that choice. She wasn't ready, but she couldn't back down. She had already come too far. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. The Vampire King gave a small nod, his expression softening just a fraction. "Good," he said. "Now let's begin." The moment he spoke, the air around them seemed to change. A sudden surge of energy filled the room, and Ira felt it deep within her, a power she had never known existed. It was like a spark had ignited inside her, and for the first time since all of this started, she didn't feel so lost. She felt alive, and maybe, just maybe, she was ready for whatever came next. The Vampire King's gaze never left her as they moved into the next phase of her training. This was it. The war was coming, and Ira had made her choice. There was no turning back now.